Thank you for staying. I know that you couldn't possibly leave without hearing from me. All right, I had a couple of notes that I made that I'd just close this out with. But to the point about investing in a pilot, and this is maybe not the program that we're going to end up adopting, had this exact same conversation when we started looking at platforms with one of our math faculty, and she was like, I'm going to devote an awful lot of time to building in this platform. You know, what kind of guarantee do we have from university administration that this is going to be around for a while? And the only answer we could give was, we're not adopting a platform in the hope that we're going to jettison it. You know, we're going to invest all of the resources that we have in making sure that this works, but there's no guarantee, right? You know, something could happen. They could get sold, or, you know, the whole thing could fall apart. And you kind of have to have at least a certain amount of risk tolerance, but you do your due diligence, and you try to mitigate that risk the best you can. And I love the idea of starting small. Pilot a module before you make a giant commitment and do a whole curriculum or something, or a whole program. A couple of quick thoughts. So as far as like next steps, I think the point of engaging faculty is 100% right. If the faculty don't want to do something, if they don't believe in the platform, if they don't believe in the approach, you're not going to get very far. Because ultimately, the faculty who are in the room, you own the curriculum, you own your courses, and you have the final say in how it's taught. So I think it's really important that we try to find the space in your lives for innovation. Again, this is something we deal with on a daily basis. I show up to department meetings or talk to individual faculty, and it's like, we got this really cool thing that we're doing. It's like, I got 3 committees I'm on, Tom, and I'm writing 2 NIH grants, and I got 4 course preps, and you know, I'm on 8 different, you know, national boards, or I'm on this different review. I don't have time, no matter how great it is, I don't have time to learn some new system. And what we need to do is give them that time. So whether that's in the way of funding, for course releases, to buy space for them to actually redesign courses, pair them up with instructional designers and technologists and media people, I think it's really important. And if the institution really cares, you're going to find a way to make that investment work. Now, I'm hopeful, Nancy, Dr. McKee is still here, that at some point we may have some state investment for this kind of innovation. Let's hope. But even if not, I think at an institutional level, and it could be one reason why we haven't scaled beyond pilot at this point. We've done a series of pilots, but we haven't really gone to scale. And it's part of my strategy to start putting a proposal in front of the provost's office to say, this is what we're going to need to go where you'd like us to go. And if the institution cares, they'll find a way. You know, they always say the money's there, it's just being spent on different things. If you're not aware of it, there's something called the Courseware in Context Framework. It was funded by the Gates Foundation. It is driven by Titan Partners, which is a consulting firm. I happen to be on the advisory board. But it's a way for you to evaluate courseware products against a rubric to determine if it meets your needs according to your own individual institutional context. If you go to courseware-in-context.org, you can find it. They're in the process of building out an online interactive version of it. Right now, they've got a kind of linked Excel file that you can go in and fill in the information, like I score this a 2 or a 3, and it'll give you kind of a summary report. But soon, like later this spring, they'll have an online web version of it that you can fill in. That might be useful for you in evaluating products and thinking about procurement. Another resource you might want to check out is something from EdSurge called the Digital Learning Network, DLN. I think most of the commercial vendors, partners that were out in the lobby here have their products listed out on the Digital Learning Network. And you can go and evaluate them based upon their own self-disclosures about what they do, how well they do it. And I might be mistaken, I haven't looked at it in a while. There might even be some mechanism for institutions that are working with them to kind of rate them. So if you're familiar with like an eBay or a Merlot kind of model where you check off stars, how well you like them, I think that's part of the DLN as well. But that might not be a bad place, since you're just starting to look at different potential partners to just go out there and do a little basic research on who's in the marketplace, the DLN. When we started a couple years ago, there were not as many vendors in the space as there are now. We would have looked at, frankly, more if we were starting now. But we put together a committee of faculty and some instructional designers who had a particular research interest in adaptive learning and came up with a set of criteria, figured out in our own heads these categories of content or platform, and then just invited a bunch of different vendors when we narrowed down the list to present to us. And we invited this committee of faculty, and we got their input, and that's eventually how we ended up choosing Realize It. They wanted a content agnostic platform, and that was the best choice that we saw in front of us at that time. Again, there are a lot more entrants in the field, and you have to think about your own context. But I think if you're going to do that kind of a review, it has to be a majority faculty on the committee, but not only faculty. And what we usually say when we're doing that kind of an evaluation, faculty preference will rule the day, but it's not a vote, because there are ultimately things like information security considerations, or does it plug into your student information system, that will overrule a faculty preference because it just doesn't work in our infrastructure. But if anybody's interested in that, or you want to see any of our stuff, it's kind of out of date now. It's a couple years old, but we're more than happy to share. Okay. It leads me to the concept of something I talked about yesterday, which is one vendor versus many vendors. So Dale Johnson showed you a list of, I don't know, 15 different vendors that they're working with. They've taken a very broad approach to looking at the entire waterfront, and we've tried to make a much more strategic single vendor approach, and that's more our style. We try not to engage with a lot of them so that we can kind of go to scale with them. That's just part of our strategy. But there are pros and cons to both. Working with a lot to kind of find out who you like and what works in different kind of curricula versus picking one horse and going really deep and understanding how to support that at scale. And I don't know what maybe the answer is here. And what we're finding is maybe it's not as easy as what we're used to. So we've got, Realize It, we've done, what did I say, 1,700 students, 30 sections of different courses. That may not be the answer for everything, because we've got pockets of other vendors. We're using, I think we mentioned Alex and LearnSmart in different places that have sort of organically bubbled up. Well, we kind of have to look at that and say, well, maybe it's more of an ecosystem that's limited. It's a garden with many different flowers in it that we don't want to fight the energy. If the faculty find value in some of these things, maybe we need to figure out a way to support that and water it and fertilize it and not fight it. Honestly, we don't know the answer to that yet. We're still figuring some of this out because we're right in the middle of it. But I think you need to ask yourselves, do we look at a lot of different products? Do we look at just a couple and figure out what makes sense? And then lastly, the idea of having a lot of different products makes it problematic, a lot of products in the marketplace, makes it problematic to change. Because right now, the systems are very proprietary. If we wanted to move from Realize It to Acrobatic, we would have to rebuild every piece of content that we have built. We couldn't take it out like we could Canvas, like in an IMS cartridge, and plug it into D2L or Blackboard or something. That just doesn't exist in the world of adaptive learning right now. And I think it's really limiting. So IMS, I don't know if University of Florida is part of IMS, but there is a committee right now that Dale Johnson is the chair of that I participate in, and I invite you guys to get involved, looking at this right now. Can we define some standards for adaptive learning that will allow for portability of content so you can move it out of one system into another? It's very early stages on this. And likewise, if you have more than one platform on campus that you're using, is there a way for data to be shared between those? So that if you're in algebra in this platform, platform X, and then they're in accounting in platform Y, but they need remediation, they can pull that data or maybe some sort of content out of one system into another so that those students can get that help without having to rebuild everything in a second platform. It's a big, snarly problem, but we're working on it, and I invite you to be a part of that conversation. So with that, those are my notes. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. I'll probably sick and tired. Yeah.
Yes, for the committee that you convened to adopt a particular learning, realize it, were there any students involved? Because I was on a committee where we moved from Canvas, actually from Blackboard to Canvas, and while it was mostly faculty and IT people and course designers, etc., we had, I think, like 3 or 4 students that were selected by the student government. So I don't know, did you get any input from students as to what type of learning system they might prefer?
For the adaptive platform, we didn't. And maybe in hindsight, we should have. Now, when we did our LMS evaluations, yeah, students were involved deeply in that. We had focus groups and we bought them pizza, all kinds of stuff. But for the adaptive evaluation, we didn't. And we have a lot of students that work for us, and they're kind of a built-in focus group, and we ask them a lot of questions, but it wasn't kind of a formal part of the process. And maybe that would be a lesson learned if we did it over again to more deeply involve students. It's a good question. Okay. I want to personally thank University of Florida for putting this on. I think it was great. Yeah.